so this is part two, and we're going to take up right where we left off, and that is the four mandatory parts of a resume. And specifically, we're going to go into each of these and tell you how to construct a little bit of information about each. So the first section is the contact info. Now you might not think there's any questions on that, but there actually are a few, and there's actually some good questions, okay? Even the name, simple and straightforward, except a question I get asked quite frequently is, what if my name isn't the same? For example, what if my name is Henry, but everybody at work called me Larry for some reason? Okay? Or, much more common, my name is Helen Clayton, but I'm married and my name used to be Helen Evans. So really, all that we're dealing with here is we don't want someone to be fact-checking our resume, call to verify your employment somewhere, and say, hi, I'm calling to find out about Henry Williams, and have them say, I don't know any Henry Williams. Henry Williams never worked here. Okay? So just put the other name in parentheses. Put it right there. This says that in the case of the male, I'm Henry Williams, but I'm also known as Larry. In the case of the female, Helen Clayton. And my maiden name is Evans, and that may be what I'm known by. Now, when someone calls to verify your employment, they're going to say something like, hi, I'm calling to check on Helen Clayton. She may actually be known as Helen Evans when she worked there. At which point in time the person says, oh, Helen Evans, yeah, she worked here. And we've solved the problem. The parentheses thing also works in other areas. For example, another common question is, what happens if my company went out of business or moved or changed its name? Well, this is where you use the parentheses again. You put down, Tim's Taco Hut, where you worked at from 2007 to 2010, and then just put in parentheses, went out of business, or bought out and changed its name to Tom's Sushi Shack or something like that, okay? So just put that right in there. Again, we want to avoid the thing where someone calls to verify your resume. It seems like you're lying to them because they don't know you, and then they hang up, throw your resume away, and go on to the next person. All right, address hopefully is straightforward. Your phone number, make sure it's labeled, make sure it's professional, make sure your bill is paid up, obviously, and really important, especially to those of you who are younger, I realize you like your ringbacks, but don't have them if you're looking for a job. Okay? Realize a lot of the people calling to verify or to call you in for an interview or something like that tend to be older. They call you, instead of hearing a phone ring, they hear the latest death metal or electronica or rap artist, and honestly, a lot of them will hang up. I've talked to them. They say that. I get that. It's unprofessional. I hang up. I go to the next applicant and I skip that person. So your phone should ring. If you don't pick it up, fine. It should go directly to a professional sounding voicemail. Something like, hi, this is Tim Trussler. Sorry I missed you. Please leave your name, phone number, and a message, and I'll get back to you as soon as possible. And that's all we're looking for. Something simple and professional. Sorry to be a killjoy. All right. Also, your email, again, professional. Pop quiz. Which one of these is appropriate? Okay, and as much as you're all dying to say number 2, I think we all see that the only appropriate email address here is number 1. Even 3, 4, and 5, it's frivolous, or heaven help you, if you have email address number 5 and your resume ends up being read by someone, or you end up being evaluated by somebody who has one of those, don't blame me, I voted for the American bumper sticker, okay? So keep it simple, your name, that's it, nothing else, okay? At least for your resume email. A couple of quick points on that also that I get asked. Don't have a joint married email. It's Tim Trussler, not Tim and Gwen Trussler, okay? Also, if your name's real common, let's say you're John Smith or something like that, that email address is taken, don't worry about it. Add a few numbers on it. No one's going to raise an eyebrow or even think twice about an email address of, John Smith 2367 at gmail.com. So that's fine, okay? But again, simple, professional, your name only. That's all we're looking for. You get your contact information and format it a little bit. Don't go out of control, but put something in there that makes it a little bit eye-catching and something that stands out from the other, 200 resumes that your resume is in with, okay? Make sure that it's appropriate. For example, the second one here is kind of eye-catching, but I certainly wouldn't use that if I was applying for a manager position or an engineer or something like that. Again, don't spend too much time on it. Just make sure it looks good, sharp, and professional. All right, let's talk about this lady right here. This is the lady who has your resume somewhere in that big giant stack. All right, how is she going to get to your resume and what is she going to do to get through those resumes? Simple. She's not going to read your resume. Okay, this is where that summary section comes into play. She's not going to read the whole resume. She's going to read your summary section and then decide if she wants to read it or not. If she doesn't like your summary section, she's done. Okay, that's all she's going to do. So what are some possible summary sections you can use? The one we're going to work with is called the summary of qualifications, where you're summarizing your qualifications for the jobs. Other things that you can see out there, and these are all fine and acceptable: a headline, an executive summary, a professional profile. For those of you that are younger and don't have a lot of work experience, you might just use your strength statement that we worked on in the previous module. Go ahead and put that in. That's a great thing. You're saying, I don't have a lot of work experience, but here's the type of person I am. Here's what you can expect out of me. Okay, so that's what we're looking at with the summary section. More than anything, it's answering the question, again, from their perspective, why should I hire you? You're trying to answer that in about 4 to 6 bullet points, about a quarter page to a half page. Don't do more or less than that, okay? If you do 1 or 2, they're going to say, why don't you have any more of these? What's wrong with you? If you do 10 of them, they're going to say, don't you know how to edit? So 4 to 6 bullet points in that prime real estate right at the top of the page, okay? And one other point about this, every statement should be provable. Everything that you have up there should be verified, documented, and proved later on in the resume. Honestly, otherwise, it looks like you went to www.coolwordsishouldusonmyresume.com and copied and pasted them into your resume. So everything that you put down there, you need to be able to own it and be able to back it up. So how do you write a summary section? Well, you have lots of things that are awesome and wonderful about you, right? And please say yes. Okay, so you do. So you're going to cherry pick. Okay, look over everything: your work history, your educational history, volunteer work that you've done, things you've done in your church, all of these things, things that you've done recently, things you did 20 and 30 years ago even. Go through and pick out the things that are best, things that make people go, ooh, I'm impressed. Okay, things that lend themselves to numbers, things that lend themselves to being easily summarized in a sentence or two. So go over your entire life, all of these experiences, and pick out the best of the best. All right, so what are some of the things we're talking about? Here's a partial list. There's lots of things that can go in here, but extensive work experience, if you have that, some areas of expertise, for example, maybe tools that you know how to use, software that you've used, if you're applying for a driving job, different vehicles that you're familiar with, everything from a tank to a forklift, things like that, accomplishments, educational achievements. Again, anyone can go to college or to high school. If you made the dean's list, make sure you're including that. If you had a great GPA, if you were involved in the yearbook committee, things like that, add those. Promotions, pay raises, certifications and trainings. Okay, you see the list here. One thing I would add about that bottom one there, I realize not everything lends itself to a number, but the fact is, when people see numbers, they tend to believe it. If you say I'm a hard worker, I go, maybe, maybe not. If you put down there made 75 widgets per week where the average employee made 50 widgets per week, I tend to believe you a lot more. Whether that's fair or not, or true or not, is a whole nother debate. The fact is, most people believe numbers a lot more. All right, so let's give you some examples. What would a summary of qualifications look like? Well, here's mine from a few years ago when almost all of my experience was as an instructor. Okay, I'm not going to read every word of this. Both of us have better things to do with our time. Feel free to hit pause if you do want to read it. But as you look at these bullet points, what I'm trying to do is stress, I am a good teacher. I'm an excellent teacher. Okay? The first bullet says, I'm a good teacher, and here's why. I got more graduates, I did it in less time, and the students in my class improved their reading and math in addition to getting their GED. That's a good bullet point. All right? Next bullet point says, I'm a good teacher, and here's why. My students thought I was a good teacher. My feedback came back really good. Third bullet point says, I'm a good teacher, and here's why. I worked with a lot of different students, not just all gifted students, not just all elementary school, not all adult learners. I worked with everybody. All right. The last bullet point says, I'm a good teacher, and here's why. I've worked with a lot of different materials. In fact, in some cases, I even made my own curriculum in order to teach a class. So all four of these overall are really trying to hit the point, hit it hard. I am a good teacher, a good instructor. Okay? Now, every time I put this slide up in a face-to-face training, or almost every time, someone raise their hand and go, you sound kind of braggy. You come across a little arrogant. And that's a valid point. All right, so let's talk about this. First of all, too bad. And I don't mean that to be flippant, okay? It's a valid point, but I mean to say this is the language of resumes. Your resumes are supposed to be braggy, okay? Your resumes are putting your best foot forward. It's highlighting your accomplishments. So you need to put these out here, claim them, and say, here's what I've accomplished with my life. All right. The second point I would respond with to that person is if it comes across a little braggy and it rubs you the wrong way, that's valid, okay? But remember what we said. Making a resume is an art, not a science. And if I send this resume out to 100 people with these bullet points, I'm sure that, 2 or 5 or 10 people go, boy, this guy's sure full of himself. That's going to happen. But the fact is, I can't write the perfect resume. So if I'm going to make a mistake on this resume, I'd much rather have it be a little bit too aggressive, a little bit too arrogant, for lack of a better term, really pushing the envelope. And if it rubs a few people the wrong way, I'd much rather have that than the flip side, where a lot of people read my resume and go, well, I don't even understand why I should hire this guy. What's good about them? Okay? So for those of you who have difficulty tooting your own horn, for lack of a better term, you really need to get over it and realize this is the way that those bullets need to be written. Okay? So, work experience. Again, really common question. How much work experience do I include? A very, very, very general rule of thumb is 10 to 15 years. Okay? This gets violated all the time. For example, in my case, the last 2 jobs I've worked cover about 18, 19 years. So I'm going to go way past. If I include 3 to 4, which is typical, I'm going to go back 20 to 25 years. That's fine. Okay? On the flip side, if you're, again, 19 years old, ready to graduate, something like that, and your past work experience might be just working at Wendy's in the summer, doing babysitting and mowing lawns and doing yard work around the neighborhood, working at your parents' store for 10 to 20 hours a week during the school year, nothing wrong with that. In fact, that's good. Go ahead and put it down. The fact that you're doing these things while you're working, while you're at school, is a good thing. Again, it beats people who sat on the couch and watch TV all day. So yes, you're right, it's not as good as 20 years as an executive VP at Microsoft, but it's certainly better than nothing. So please put that down. Nothing wrong with that, okay? You do need to deal with some problem areas. For those of you who have gaps in your work history, you need to start thinking about how you're going to fill that in. If it was disability, if you're a homemaker, if you took some time off, things like that, you need to start saying, here's how I'm going to deal with that. Here's how I'm going to fill these gaps in. Okay? And I like to use what I call the straight line test. And what that means is everything that you said in that summary of qualifications, I can draw a straight line from that to at least one place, and hopefully more than one in the resume that backs that up. Let me show you what I mean. Here's Chloe Zabatsky. And she's claiming that she's an expert in juggling multiple projects. Do we believe her? Of course not. We're HR. We don't believe anyone because everybody lies to us in order to get the job. Okay? Understand that, by the way. Everybody lies to HR, so they don't believe you. Okay? But I look down on her resume under this personal assistant and I see, planned 2 major relocations, assisted in site selection, worked with an architect on interior design, and oversaw equipment, furniture, telecommunication setup without interruption in operations. Okay, now I believe it. Again, I think expert is really overselling it by saying that, but I'd rather she did that and was aggressive than said, I don't think I qualify, and left it off the resume, okay? She definitely is showing that she can multitask, that she can handle stress, she can handle projects. It's a good point on the resume, okay? So that's the straight line test. Everything up on that highlight of qualifications is backed up down the resume during your work experience. Now, what is the single biggest change in resumes? For those of you who did your resume 10 years ago, listen up, okay? Get your notes out, whatever, all right? The biggest change in resumes is what's called value added, okay? And you'll see it referred to other things, value statements, things like that. But here's the basic point, and here's what it means. No longer is it acceptable to simply list your job responsibilities. That's the way it used to be. In fact, in the old days, you'd get a job description, copy and paste your job responsibilities, put it in the resume, and you're done. Okay? Not the case anymore. Make sure you understand this. Because the fact is, if you list your job responsibilities and that's all you do, you're never actually telling me if you're any good or not. For example, let's say you're a waitress. That was your work. Don't tell me that you gave menus to people, you greeted people when they came in, cleaned tables, took orders, carried food back and forth, made change, things like that. I already know you do that. That's what waitress means, okay? What you need to do is tell me, what did you do over and above what the average employee did? So maybe you saved money. All right, maybe you save time. Maybe you found a new way to do stuff in the kitchen so that productivity increased. This is where we go back to that. Everybody else did 50 widgets or made 50 widgets. I made 75. All right, a huge one is additional responsibilities given. If you got hired as, let's say, a cashier, and then they said, wow, you're doing good. We're going to make you an assistant manager or a lead tech, or we're going to make you a manager. Things like that. You get promoted up the chain, you absolutely want to include that. Even if you didn't get promoted, if they just gave you more things to do, you were hired to do task A, and they said, wow, you're doing so good at A, we want you to do tasks B and C as well. Write that into your resume, because that's the company saying you're doing a good job in the formal way of doing it. Some other things you might want to include: ideas you had that were implemented, certifications that were obtained. Definitely include promotions, raises, and awards, because again, that's the company saying good job in an official and formal way. So that's a value added statement. And add as much of this to your resume as you can. We'll hit this a lot more in the next couple of weeks, but definitely start on that process now. Don't just list your job responsibilities. All right, and then the last thing to talk about is simply education. And the first thing we need to talk about is HR versus manager. All of us have seen a listing for a job that we thought we'd be great at, but we didn't meet the requirements, especially on something like education, where it says you have to have a BA or an AA, or it has to be one of these specific degrees, something like that. So the question is, can you get around that? And the answer is, if it's HR, no. Okay? For the most part, it's not going to happen. HR is of the belief that if they make any exceptions, the company will go out of business under a flurry of lawsuits. Now, we can talk about whether it's a valid belief or not, but that's their belief. They don't make exceptions. So if it says BA, you gotta have a BA. They will not read it if you have an AA. All right? On the other hand, if you're dealing with a manager, a department manager, if there's any way that you can get in to see him and plead your case, you absolutely want to do that, okay? You want to go in, very politely, but basically what you're saying is, look, I've done this in the real world. I've done it for 5 years or 10 years or 20 years. I know a lot more than some 19-year-old kid who passed a test, all right? Say it a little bit more politely than that, but here's the thing. The manager agrees with you. In fact, somebody else probably wrote the job description. It wouldn't have ended up that way if he wrote it. All right? So if you get a chance to do an end run or to end up in the manager's office, and again, if you're qualified for the job, absolutely go for it. Okay? This may be obvious to everyone, but want to lay it out here. You are somewhere on this educational ladder. Make sure you accurately represent yourself. Don't lie and put yourself higher on the ladder, but on the other hand, don't leave stuff off and put yourself lower on the ladder. If you've taken some college classes, for example, include that. Say that you took 25 general education credits, or took 30 credits focusing on early childhood education, or something like that. And specifically, a lot of you are going to have your degree, and hopefully the near future, put it down. Say, you're getting, for example, an AA and legal office assistant or something like that, and then you simply put completed or expected completion date June 2016, saying I'm in the process right now, and I should have this next year. Okay? And then the last thing is, again, for those of you who might not have a lot of education or are just starting off in this, include certifications and trainings, okay? The point is, you're trying to tell the person looking at your resume that you actually can learn. If all they see is high school graduate or a non-completer and they see no education other than that, they're going to think, this is probably a person who can't learn. So you want to make sure and demonstrate that to them. All right? So where are we at now? We're finished up with this. You're going to move on to your assignment. You're going to be completing a first draft of a resume here. So move on to that. Just to let you know, there's a couple of supplemental lectures as well. You're probably going to want to look at those as well, and then make sure you post to the discussion board. Other than that, get started and good luck.